Beneath the Rapids, a darn good read original. I'll never forget the way the river looked that morning. The surface rippled like molten glass, reflecting the canopy of trees overhead. It was the kind of scene you'd find on a postcard. One of those places that begged you to stay just a little longer. Sam paddled ahead of me, his kayak bobbing easily with the current. He turned back, his face split into a grin. "Come on, Dad! You're so slow." "I'm savoring the moment," I called back, feigning annoyance. Truthfully, I liked hanging him back and watching him like this, confident, full of life. This trip was my idea. After a tough year, I wanted us to have some uninterrupted father-son time. The river seemed perfect, peaceful, calming, a place to reconnect. We were supposed to stick to the main stretch, but Sam spotted a narrow channel veering off to the left. "Let's check it out," he shouted, already steering his kayak toward it. "Sam, wait!" But he was already gone, swallowed by the dense overgrowth. I sighed and paddled after him. The channel narrowed quickly, the trees overhead forming a tunnel that filtered the sunlight into eerie green shadows. The air felt cooler here, heavier. "Sam, slow down," I called, my voice echoing off the rocky walls. "I'm fine," he shouted back. His voice sounded farther away than it should have. The current grew stronger, tugging at my kayak. The water darkened, swirling around the roots of ancient trees. Something about this place felt wrong. "Sam!" There was no answer. I paddled harder, panic rising in my chest. The channel twisted sharply, and when I rounded the bend, I froze. The water ahead churned violently, disappearing into a black, gaping hole in the riverbed. A whirlpool. "Sam!" I screamed, but there was no sign of him. His kayak was nowhere to be seen. The current dragged me toward the whirlpool. I fought it with everything I had, but the force was relentless. The roar of the water swallowed my screams as I was pulled down into the darkness. When I opened my eyes, I was floating in silence. The roar of the whirlpool was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. I coughed, spitting out water, and looked around. I wasn't on the river anymore. I was in a cavern, its jagged walls glowing faintly with an unnatural green light. The water beneath me was black and still, reflecting the twisted stalactites that hung overhead like jagged teeth. "Sam!" I called, my voice cracking. A faint echo answered me. "Sam?" This time I heard it, a faint voice calling back, "Dad!" Relief flooded through me, but dread quickly followed. His voice was distant, muffled, like it was coming from behind a wall. I paddled toward the sound, my breath shallow. The cavern was massive, its walls etched with strange symbols that pulsed faintly. The air was thick, metallic. "Keep talking to me, Sam," I shouted. "Dad, I'm stuck." His voice was closer now, but tinged with panic. I followed the sound to a narrow passage carved into the rock. It was barely wide enough for my kayak, but I didn't hesitate. The passage opened into a smaller chamber, and there he was, clinging to a jagged rock in the middle of the water. His kayak was overturned, wedged against the far wall. "Dad!" I paddled over and reached for him. His hands were cold and trembling as I pulled him into my kayak. You okay?" He nodded, though his face was pale. "Dad, there's something down here." "What do you mean?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "I heard noises," he whispered. "Footsteps and whispers." I swallowed hard. We need to get out of here. We paddled back toward the main cavern, but the current seemed to have a mind of its own, pushing us deeper into the maze of tunnels. The green glow on the walls grew fainter, the air colder. At one point, we hit a dead end, a wall of stone etched with the same strange symbols I'd seen before. "Now what?" Sam asked, his voice shaking. I studied the symbols, running my fingers over the grooves. They were warm to the touch, almost alive. As I pressed harder, a low hum filled the air. The wall began to shift, grinding open to reveal another tunnel. "Stay close," I said, gripping my paddle tightly. We moved into the tunnel, the hum growing louder. The light flickered like a dying flame, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. "Dad," Sam whispered, "I think something's following us." I turned, and my blood ran cold. At first, I thought it was just the flickering light. But as I stared, the shadows along the walls began to take shape. They were human-like, but wrong. Their limbs were too long, their movements jerky and unnatural. Their faces were blank, their hollow eyes fixed on us. "Paddle faster," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The shadows moved with us, their forms flickering in and out of sight. They didn't touch the ground, but floated just above it, gliding silently like smoke. "Dad, they're getting closer," Sam cried. I paddled as hard as I could, my arms burning. The tunnel twisted and turned, the walls closing in around us. The shadows moved faster, their hollow eyes glowing faintly. One reached out, its hand elongated into a claw-like shape. "Don't look back," I shouted, though I couldn't stop myself from glancing over my shoulder. The nearest shadow was only a few feet away, its claw-like hand inches from our kayak. I took the oar and swung it at the shadow. It passed through the figure like smoke, but the creature recoiled, letting out a guttural hiss. They don't like the light, I realized. The glow from the strange symbols on the walls seemed to hold them at bay, but the light was fading. "Dad, there's a door," Sam shouted. Ahead, I saw it, a massive stone door etched with the same glowing symbols. It stood on a rocky island at the center of another cavern. "Go!" I shouted. We paddled with everything we had, the shadows swarming behind us. As we reached the island, the shadows surged forward, their guttural whispers turning into screams. "Push the door!" I shouted, dragging the kayak onto the rocky shore. Sam and I threw our weight against the stone. It didn't budge at first, but as the symbols on the door began to glow brighter, it started to move. The shadows screeched, their forms flickering violently. "Dad, hurry!" Sam cried. With one final push, the door swung open. A blinding white light poured through, engulfing the cavern. The shadows let out one final, deafening scream before dissolving into nothingness. We stumbled through the door, falling onto a riverbank bathed in sunlight. The roar of the rapids filled my ears, and when I turned, the door was gone, just a sheer rock face where it had been. Sam sat beside me, shaking. "Dad, what was that?" I pulled him into a hug, my heart still pounding. I don't know, but we're safe now. That's all that matters. The river looked the same as it had this morning, but I knew we'd never see it the same way again. As we loaded my kayak onto the truck, I noticed something etched into the underside of it. The same strange symbols we'd seen in the cavern. I didn't point them out to Sam. Some things are better left unsaid.